This is 9/11 Freefall.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. My name is Andy Steele, and I am the host. Tonight, we'll be joined by AE 9/11 Truth board members Kamal, Obeid, and Pfeiffer. They'll be talking about the upcoming World Trade Center 7 study. That interview is coming your way in just a moment.
I was in the lobby and the third explosion, the whole lobby collapsed on us.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was.
Floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was if they had detonated.
Detonated.
They were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
We have explosive demolition at not only the Twin Towers, but also Building 7.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
You want to call your mother or something?
It's just a matter of time. That's all it is. It's a matter of time and the persistence of those who continue to adhere to it and push for it. And that's what we're doing.
Tune in to 9/11 Freefall, a show about 9/11 truth, 9/11 science, and the activists and scholars who are blowing the lid off the crime of the century. You can download episodes at 911freefall.com.
The views expressed on this show by guests and the host on issues outside of the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence are the opinions of those individuals alone and do not necessarily reflect those of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth.
I am joined by two board members with AE 9/11 Truth. The first one is Kamal Obeid. Kamal holds a master's degree in civil engineering from the University of California, Berkeley. He has been practicing civil and structural engineering in the San Francisco Bay Area since 1980, and he has been a licensed structural engineer since 1985. During his career, he has served as an engineer of record on many building design and retrofit projects. He specializes in structural steel building analysis as well as investigating structural failures of steel frame buildings. And at one point he served as a volunteer for the Office of Emergency Services, that's FEMA. And he investigated earthquake failures. When he did that, he's a longtime member SE of the Structural Engineers Association of Northern California and has served on several of its code and business forum committees. And of course, he's a board member with AE, as I mentioned. Kamal, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here, Andy. Thank you.
He's joined today by Marshall Casey Pfeiffer. Mr. Pfeiffer has a Bachelor of Civil Engineering degree from the University of Notre Dame. He has been working as a structural engineer in the greater San Diego, California area for the past 21 years. He spent 4 years working for KPFF Consulting Engineers in Los Angeles, 7 years with Hope Engineering, which is now Kaufman Engineers in San Diego, and 10 years as an owner of Pacific Coast Structural Engineering, LLC in San Diego. He has design experience using concrete masonry, structural steel, cold-formed steel studs, wood, and post-installed mechanical anchors. His experience in jurisdiction building styles includes medical, hospitality, industrial, academic, commercial, speculative, commercial, multifamily residential, single-family custom home, sculpture, and forensic investigation of existing structural systems for renovation and repair. So that is a mouthful, but he is here today, and of course, like I've said before, he's also a board member with AE 9/11 Truth. So Casey, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much. Appreciate the opportunity to talk on the subject again. Now that I'm hearing the intro, sounds like I need to cut it back a bit. Sounds like a resume that I'm trying to get a job at, but appreciate the opportunity to speak on this subject tonight.
Well, I appreciate you, and I wanted to go through your entire background because typically I have the guests do that, but we got so much to talk about tonight. with the news that is coming out, the World Trade Center 7 study coming out on September 3rd. A lot of people are excited about that. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. And our audience is familiar with you guys and the great work you're doing. Now, because you're both board members, and this is an important job here at AE 911 Truth, I want to get your perspective on this. Just like we did last week with Richard Gage and Ted Walter, let's take a minute to step back and reflect on all the work that has been done here. We're going to get to the Building 7 study, but I'd like to get your take on the growing momentum we see taking place here in the world of the 9/11 Truth movement, the people who have been talking about the World Trade Center evidence for a number of years. I see a lot of positive things happening. What's your big picture view of what's going on at the moment and where the momentum is headed? We'll start with Kamal.
Well, I think aside from this wonderful study that is just about to be released, which is going to culminate years of analysis and investigation of the collapse of Building 7, in addition to the various other things that are happening, such as the impaneling of the grand jury and the increase in activity with the lawyers. I think this is just seems to be culminating this new interest that is basically gaining momentum. And it's a very exciting time to basically come back and look at these buildings again and invite many of the structural engineering as well as other professional community to come and take a closer look at this. So I think it's a momentous occasion for the 9/11 Truth movement, and I'm very excited about that.
Absolutely, and you cite the legal actions that are going on with the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 inquiry. I know that we were talking about that during the winter when they filed the grand jury petition, when they filed the lawsuit against the FBI, trying to compel our own major investigative body in this country to actually do their job and look at the evidence that ordinary people have collected throughout the years. And people are very galvanized by those actions for certain. Casey, same question. Let's have your big picture view on the momentum that's taking place in this movement.
Yeah, I think it's very exciting. Obviously, the Building 7 report and more importantly, the videos are going to be extremely impactful. The Lawyers Committee, what they're doing is fantastic. I do hope that finds its way. I'm distrustful of the legal system, generally speaking, but I do hope it finds its way. At least it's getting a ton of publicity, and I think it has a good chance to mean something, or it could be built upon in the future. I think that Richard is doing, and all the rest of the folks are doing such a tremendous job of getting out and speaking, not only in America, but also in the European conferences and interviews. I do believe there's a lot of movement towards getting people excited. And I mean, for those of us who have been in this for a while, it feels nice to see that other people are starting to listen as opposed to refuse to listen.
That's right. And, I've heard so many people get excited about what's going on. And we have people that write to us and say, thank you for doing this study. Thank you for participating in the legal actions. Every once in a while, you'll get somebody who'll be pessimistic and say, why bother? Why do this? 18 years later, all of this stuff. But, I mean, first of all, there's no reason to be pessimistic because who can live their life like that? I like to be optimistic. I like to see the future because if you envision victory, then you have all that much more chance of gaining it. And I just don't see the system as holding on to power forever acting the way that it's doing. It's just sort of a rule in history, if you study it, that eventually bad people bring themselves down. But there's no reason to be pessimistic, and these are the things that you have to do. You have to reach out to members of Congress. You have to reach out to presidential candidates. You have to go through the legal system, because these are the avenues available to us. These are the avenues that we're expected to go through. And as has been documented so many times on the show, we have had success. It doesn't happen in one day. Rome wasn't built in a day. It didn't fall in a day either. But to look at where we are now compared to where we have been, we've taken giant leaps, and those leaps are getting bigger and bigger as we go along. Now, the main thing that we're focusing on, and the reason that we have the engineers on today, is we're still talking about this Building 7 study. It's almost out. It's coming out September 3rd. Again, we'll start with Kamal. I mean, how, in your mind, as an engineer, do you think this will change the game regarding the debate about what really happened to Building 7 on September 11th? What will be the reaction, do you think?
Well, you know, for me, and I think I can maybe speak for people of like mind, perhaps, from a very analytical point of view, the Building 7 allows engineers to really take a look at that structural failure compared to the two twin towers, which are a little much more complicated. The Building 7, of course, was not directly hit by a plane, and the official narrative is that some debris hit that building and basically generated some fires, furniture fires within the structure, and those furniture fires brought about a series of events that caused the building to collapse the way it did. So that's the official story, that after several years that the government, NIST, the National Institute of Standards, came up with in their voluminous report. When engineers look at this, and I've talked to several other colleagues of mine, they all, when you talk to them, they all agree that this is, it does appear like this building has undergone a controlled demolition. And the collapse, the way it collapsed perfectly at free falls into its footprint, is completely contrary to what the NIST analysis showed. In fact, they came up with animations that showed how the building collapsed. And the animations are such that they talked about that the building could collapse that way, the initiation of collapse, which are all unlikely events, that this study that is now being released basically debunks every one of these possible scenarios that brought about these series of events. But the point is that even NIST, in their analysis, they generated an animated mechanism, an animated collapse scenario that basically shows the building crumpling up as opposed to completely collapsing into its footprint. And in fact, if we agree with NIST on any of those unlikely events that had happened that caused the partial failures of the building on the inside, this is correct of what the building would look like when it's collapsing. In fact, it'll crumple up the way they showed in the animation. So now with this study, the study that Professor Huxley came up with, is he looked at several scenarios of how the building could collapse, and several scenarios. Of course, he looked at all the initiating events, and every single one of them, including the analysis of how fire propagates within the building, and how fire heats up structural elements, and how they react to the fire, as well as looking at each one of what they call the progressive series of events that had happened, and every one of them is unlikely to have happened. And then, of course, the more interesting part is that the study looks at how to make the building collapse the way it actually did, and actually through this very intricate analysis that the University of Fairbanks have put together, they have looked at several scenarios where they looked at removing the interior columns and removing various different columns and collapsing portions of the building, what it looks like when it collapses. And so the first one of those is if all these series of events have caused the inside of the building to collapse, what's called column 79 and 80 and 81 in one corner of the core of the building, then what happens to the building is it actually starts leaning as opposed to collapsing into its footprint. So what they had to do is actually go through and sever several columns simultaneously to basically generate the free fall collapse into its footprint. So with that, all these animations have been created that make it so interesting. I mean, I shouldn't really belittle the gravity of this awful day and this awful catastrophe, but makes it quite interesting for engineers to look at all these different scenarios and each scenario what the collapse of the building looks like. And I think that would really is going to sway many professionals into basically taking a closer look and basically demanding further investigation of this collapse and further investigation of the 9/11, the whole collapse of all buildings. So it's a great time.
It is a great time, and of course, many people say it, Building 7 is the beginning of the fall of a house of cards on the official story. That's why it's so important. It's the easiest to prove. Just instinctively, watching this building come down, people know it's a controlled demolition. Casey, same question. Building 7 study is almost out. How, in your mind, do you think this will change the game regarding the debate that's been going on for years about what happened to this building on 9/11?
Well, I have to reach back to all the times where I spoke to various friends, colleagues, structural engineers, where I bring up the question, and their first response is, well, it's possible, right? Some of these buildings could have, it's possible, these things, without a deep analysis and without them spending time looking at it, they think to themselves, it's possible. And so what this report does for all of those people all of the structural engineers out there, and there's a lot of them, and structural engineers, they're just, as Kamal said, they're very analytic, and the ability to see a direct, deep analysis with computer modeling that mimics the actual visual evidence of the building collapsing is, for most engineers, it's going to be a slam dunk at that point, because they're just going to say, well, okay, that's a repeatable experiment. That is the scientific method. The computer is able to perfectly, when I say perfectly, within margin of error, as perfectly as possible, it seems, mimic the actual collapse of the building through the analysis that they went through. Now, I mean, the report's going to come out, and it's going to go through all of those points. But that ability to do that is what science is all about. And it's what structural engineers hang their hat on. They hang their hat on the ability to basically try to predict how buildings will operate when the earth moves, when the wind moves, or in this instance, when you have a semi-catastrophic impact, collapse, failure, what have you. Like, how does it work? I mean, there are whole engineers that do controlled demolition engineering. They try to figure out how to bring a building down. That exists. They do this for a living. And so the ability to basically mimic that real event in a computer through backwards engineering, and the thing that gets missed a little bit is the availability of information. So we are able to get the availability of information for Building 7. Furthermore, we still have the availability of information on Buildings 1 and 2, and where that stuff is going to get brought forward as well. So whenever it comes down to the point where we're going to model building 1 and 2 and show what happened there, like, it's going to happen at some point. I mean, it might take 4 or 5 years. Who knows how long it'll take, because it's going to take a lot of effort. But we're starting to get the actual information to do that. So whenever you compare those two things, I mean, it's very exciting, because on an engineer level, it is a game changer. It changes the game for all engineers. Now, they're still going to suffer from the, how do you say that? You know, like, what can I do about it? So if we can find a way to make it easy for them to do something about it, then that's going to be huge, and that will be part of our task moving forward, is to make it easy for the engineers to participate without they're busy. And so, especially now, when the economy is busy, engineers are very busy. So it's exciting. I think there's a lot of exciting parts about it, but the direct analysis and the ability to present it in a scientific manner is fantastic. I mean, it's awesome.
It is, and I love that we've taken the step. It's been a long time coming, waiting for this. And there's something very impactful, in my view, this is me speaking now, about overkill. And I'll tend to do that as a joke when I'm making a point with friends over more trivial issues than 9/11, of course, but I'll keep on pointing out these different answers and different pieces of evidence to support my case, to the point where they'll say, stop it already, I get it. And I kind of said this when we were doing the Bobby McIlvaine Act, is that how much more work does Congress want us to do for them? We've written the bill for them. We've done the work for them. How much else can we do, aside from running for Congress or something? What can we do? Now, speaking scientifically about Building 7, I'm asking you guys this question. As engineers who are familiar with this area of study, obviously, how much more do we really have to do after this study is released? I mean, what work is there left to do to continue to prove that NIST is wrong and to justify at least the need for a new investigation? Kamal, we'll begin with you.
Well, I just want to basically acknowledge our team, our AU 9/11 Truth team, and specifically from the engineering side, one of our board members and wonderful activist, Roland, and he's leading the charge on really educating the engineering community, relentlessly pursuing the avenues to try to educate and get engineers to raising awareness at the various different association meetings and other organizational meetings. And I think this would be the jumping board for continuing, taking this study as well as possible future additional studies, to basically travel with that and engage other engineers and actually there's so many other people, other professional engineers who have expressed so much interest in actually participating in this venture, in this effort, that it seems to take a life of its own and grow. And we hope that it would actually reach far and wide and raise awareness. It's a question of really raising awareness about this and inviting people to really go beyond their comfort zone and examine this evidence and examine all the record of what was put out by the government agencies, as well as analysis through the various alternative activist groups that have looked at this thing. And I think this is really what's going to be building the critical mass. We hope, of course, that would start affecting change.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, the case is proven. The need for a new investigation is no minor thing. It's urgent, in my view. The case is made. And we got to let engineers know. And it's amazing that there are engineers out there who still don't even know not only that this controversy exists, but there was even a third building that fell on September 11th. For us, it's old hat. This is common fact in our brains is the fact that World War II happened. But for a lot of the general public, they don't even know about this third tower. So we definitely need to get Roland and his team out there doing the great work that they are doing to educate other engineers, first to let them know that this building exists, and then to look into this evidence and do it with an open mind and have the courage to step forward and call for a new investigation. Casey, same question. In the case of Building 7, how much more do we really need to do after this study to prove what we've been saying for years? NIST was wrong, and that we need a new investigation that looks into the possibility of explosives.
Well, I like Kamal's answer quite a lot. I also want to give kudos and all credit to Roland Angle, who was also in the Experts Speak Out production a number of years back. But getting in front of engineers, if you just look at it in terms of a business model, what you see is that if you have a good product and nobody knows about it, it won't come to fruition. So you have to spend the time to get in front of the people that are going to have an audience. I mean, it's almost like all the various marketing programs that you see that happens through Google where people are selling advertisement. You have to get it in front of people. And, of course, the other folks, that's what I'm saying, Richard and Kelly and the whole crew of folks at AE 9/11 Truth, they do a great job of getting it out. It's very impressive. Now, another thought that I think, I'll try to bring forward as well is this idea of just trying to find another group of people to do a critical analysis of the actual model. So take the data from the University of Fairbanks, take that data and test it themselves. Come up with a, second and third party critical critique of the analysis, and, in a way that it's non-biased, that it's not being paid for by anyone particular. People that want to volunteer to take that data and work on a team and do an analysis and give it a critical opinion on it. Because as soon as they do that, that's whenever it'll really hit home. I mean, nothing hits home like actually testing it out yourself. And if others are able to do that, the impact will expand. And but in terms of what it is on its face, the report covers, it's extensive. And it really covers the basis and thinks about it fully on many levels. So it's going to have a big impact on the scientific community as well as the structural engineering community.
Absolutely. And what you're talking about right now is the scientific process. It involves transparency. It involves having all of your data laid out for the public to see and test if they want to. Have the people that support what we're doing test it. Have the people who absolutely do not support what we're doing test it, so that everything is put through the process and that we can come at some truth in the end. I'm very confident that during the open comment period that the analysis is going to remain coming to the same conclusions once that public comment period is over. But that is how science is done. And Casey, I'm going to start with you now because you kind of touched on this just a moment ago with other groups testing the analysis. Can you speak about transparency, the importance of it in a process like this, and compare it to the way that NIST handled this matter when they were doing their reports and the lack of transparency we saw there?
Well, the lack of transparency is the first clue that something's wrong. It's the idea of the hand, open hand, or the hand behind your back. And so if you can't show everything, then the first question is what are you trying to hide? And if we're not allowed to try to repeat the experiment, then is it repeatable? So any kind of idea, whether it's this event or any other event that exists in this world, trying to hide information about why it happened, who did it, how it happened, it just breeds this distrust that it's authentic. And you have to be fully transparent. And if you're not, I mean, the whole engineering world exists on it. If you provide a complex analysis of something, you can't say, it's good, here's my thumb, wink, wink, it's good. No, you gotta write out all the equations that are being used as a standard for how to do a thing, and you have to show directly on paper how it all works. Or you utilize these programs, which are tried and true programs that are used by the entire industry, which is what they used, and you utilize those programs, which everybody trusts to build the buildings, so they should trust it to find out if the building can fail. You use these programs and demonstrate in front of everybody, give them access to it, and then it's hard to say otherwise, because they'll fall into the same, hate to say it, the same lazy notion as they are in now. That what am I going to do? I'm going to go through the effort to analyze it. Well, if you have a group that has gone through that effort, has a model, and lets you use it, you have no excuse but to check it out yourself or trust that the information that you're seeing is based on information, because it's what's available to you. You can look it up yourself at any point. And that's what's going to happen, and that's going to have a big impact on scientists, a.k.a. engineers, in this world.
Yeah, and I ask all of our listeners to tune in to the live stream from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. We'll have a link to the live stream right up on our website that will take you to be able to watch it. And you're going to see some amazing animations there. Very different than what we saw from NIST, where they don't even go through the entire collapse sequence. The second the building starts to do something different than what we saw in real life, it stops. They don't release the input data on their World Trade Center 7 models because it'll somehow jeopardize public safety. I don't feel that I would be unsafe as a result of them releasing that, but the government has decided that for us. Or rather, they're using it as an excuse to not release this. Now, Richard Gage had the perfect answer to this when he was on C-SPAN many years ago, is that the architects and engineers need that data to make the buildings more safe. I mean, if we live in a world now where a few random fires can cause a steel frame high-rise to collapse at free fall acceleration in 7 seconds, I mean, that should be a crisis. That should be something that is at the forefront of the engineering industry to keep it from happening again. So why not release that data for the engineering community to learn from and make the buildings safer? So the public safety argument is just weak, and we know what this lack of transparency is about, those of us who have been following it for years. So that's what you're getting from the other side. Our side, you're getting full transparency, and you will be able to check it. Kamal, I want to hear your thoughts on the importance of transparency and contrasting it with what the other side gave us back in 2008.
I think Casey articulated this perfectly, actually. I really think he's right on the process of transparency and what it should look like. But I do want to just remind people that, especially in the engineering community who have actually looked at the initial availability of data that basically directly after the event 9/11, and remind our listeners as well that the engineers have a tough time. Actually, we're talking about computer models now and animations and all that, and really that's what we've got to work with. But recall that the evidence, all the structural steel in that building was essentially gone, and was not, engineers did not have the ability to actually review the failed members, which is really a physical evidence that it's so disappointing that we could not even take a look at that. And so what we're left with is really generating these computer models and very sophisticated models that basically give us a peek at what happened and what could happen. So we have, of course, all the video evidence that's available to see thankfully, thank the internet for basically having all these videos all over that you could compile and take a look at from various different angles and see how the buildings collapsed. And if it wasn't for the internet, then we would not be able to have all this evidence. So we're kind of limited with what we have, and with what we have, essentially, we do the best we can and open up the analysis, which is what is happening, to the professional community to take a look at and critique. And we'd love to hear some critique from other engineers, whether they are doubtful about these results or whether they agree with them. But to open it up for debate is really the most important critical issue here, is to actually talk about it and discuss it and publicize it and have a vigorous and open debate about the various different components of what went into this analysis and what has happened before and what NIST came up with. And so that's true transparency, in my opinion, as well.
Now, I got a hypothetical question I want to ask both of you. We'll start with Kamal. I ask you to put yourself in the role of somebody, an engineer in your position, but pretend you had never heard of this issue before, or pretend you're not a board member for AE 9/11 Truth, and that you happen to come across an article talking about this study that came out from the University of Alaska Fairbanks that's proven that NIST was wrong when it comes to World Trade Center 7, and it piques your interest, and you decide to look into it, and you decide to look into the data and test it for yourself. In that scenario, as an engineer, what would you be looking at?
It is now time to actually go back and look at all the record. And for anybody who has a curious mind and anybody who is concerned of what path we took after 9/11 and all the different code changes and all the different seminars that were put out by the community about progressive collapse, and so I mean now is the time to really re-examine all that and re-examine the truth and re-examine the study, and basically at the very least the takeaway would be to improve the safety of buildings, to understand them better and look at the actual mechanics behind this collapse and try to really understand it. And engineers, the wonderful thing about engineers is they have a very curious mind. They're scientists, and any engineer should be very interested in this and actually spending the time and going through and reviewing all these documents and reviewing everything. And so now is the time to really start doing that, because you have multiple views, multiple studies, and this is the time to start formulating one's own opinion as an engineer as to where the truth is. Well, what happened? Why did these buildings collapse? What is the mechanism? All of these things are now coming to the forefront.
Casey, same question. As an engineer who wasn't familiar with this, what would be the first thing you were looking at in the analysis that would be the most curious about when looking at a group that's challenged the government's findings on Building 7?
Well, the first thing you look for is access to information. What's the information? What are the assumptions? Then, of course, the access to having the model, and if you have the software, of course. There's a lot of engineering offices that do have the software, and if you have the software, then you have the opportunity to run it. I mean, literally, for folks that know how to run this software, you download it, you install it into You open it up into the computer program, and you can start running it. I mean, it doesn't take very long for engineers to look at the assumptions that are being placed. And now this is a complex model, but still, if you don't have to create it yourself, if you're just doing post-analysis of what's already been created, it's very easy to go in and check a bunch of information. Kamal brought up an awesome point, which I always love to bring up, is this idea of building codes. Whenever you look at building codes, what building codes changed as it relates to the actual damage and the alleged problems that occurred? It didn't really change. And so, mostly what I initially expect is a lot of surprise and rejection. But for those engineers that are compelled to demonstrate their ability as a scientist and engineer and test it themselves and check it out themselves and find out if there's a lie in front of them or if it's the truth, then utilizing the data that's going to be available is going to be so easy for them, because most of these engineers out there are working in a large corporation that has these programs available, and you can just run it yourself. So we keep talking about engineers, which is fun and fantastic, because I know that I have had a very difficult time convincing engineers of the story because they don't want to spend the time to look at it. Well, this is pretty shocking, this report will be, for them. And the exciting part outside of the engineers is that there'll be a second fully developed engineering opinion on the story, and it's in such deep contradiction to the official story that it will have a big impact on non-engineers, other regular scientists that are not structural engineers, or regular people that, doctors, lawyers, almost anybody, right? Anybody that has a mind to think about it, it will challenge their mind on the story, because this is going to be a really great report.
That's right, and if you're a boxing fan like me, it's almost like the official story from NIST has gotten a TKO. It's laying in the corner, breathing heavy, and we've got a new champion here. It's going to be the Alaska Fairbanks study, and that is going to be the one that they're really going to have to try to knock down. I don't think they're going to be able to, because we all know what happened on that day and what the evidence shows. So I am really excited to watch this Fairbanks event. Now, I want to make sure we shine a light on what's going on at Berkeley, and I'll be there. Other members of AE 9/11 Truth will be there, and I know Kamal is going to be there. Kamal, we talked about it a little bit last week, but tell us more about it. Tell us about the event taking place at Berkeley on September 5th.
Well, this will be taking place at the faculty club of the engineering faculty club at UC Berkeley, and this is a building that this is a venue that I had not been to in over 30 years, I must admit. So it's a beautiful location. The only thing is that the room has limited capacity, and at the rate we're going, I think the amount of interest that I think is going to be generated could actually attract so many people. And I would hate to disappoint so many people if we have a huge crowd, a standing room only, and then people would have to be standing outside as well. So, but this is going to be a momentous event that basically will introduce Professor Huxley, and who will basically discuss his findings and show his report, as well as all the animations. Very exciting stuff that is going to be presented that day. And we're trying to engage the university faculty as well as students, and inviting them to attend. So it would be, we hope that very good questions will be asked, and this is going to generate a lot of professional curiosity that will last and basically drive further excitement about the findings of the study.
That's right. So again, just to reiterate, it's going to be on September 5th, the Faculty Club at UC Berkeley. Seating priority will be given to UC Berkeley students and faculty, as well as our petition signers. We got a poster now. I just noticed this up on the website. I love this poster. It's got a picture of the model, a picture of Leroy Halsey, and I'm not giving it justice through my verbal description here. You gotta see it, but it looks beautiful. But yeah, you can go down there, you can see this, and again, this is only the beginning. This is only what's going on around the anniversary this year. After 9/11, the outreach will continue, and we would love to have more presentations at more universities and have Leroy give the evidence to different students. We want the questions. We want the challenges. We want to stand up to the scrutiny here and really have something that can be considered as the truth, is considered as the most scientific report on the subject in history. So if you work at a university, if you are an engineer, professor, and you're interested in having a presentation at your college, let us know, and we will work with you to make it happen. So you guys have looked into this study, and I think about engineering professors, and I sympathize with people who are in positions where they know the truth on an issue such as this, where they can speak expertly on it, but there may be fear of career pressure taking on something controversial like this. If I was an engineering professor and I didn't work for AE 9/11 Truth and have the total freedom to speak about this, if I didn't have this kind of freedom and I was an engineering professor, one method that I might do is just introduce this report to my students and say, what do you think about this? And not give my opinion, but let students analyze it and give their thoughts without influencing which way the discussion goes. So that way you haven't advocated on behalf of challenging the government's report, but at the same time you haven't suppressed it either, and you've let people know about this. How do you feel about that method and that suggestion to engineering professors? Do you think that could work, and do you think discussion of this report can avoid the controversy that talking about World Trade Center controlled demolition evidence has faced in the past because this is a university report? We'll start with Kamal.
Well, that's a great question, Andy. I would hope that it would happen, but I doubt that this will be the outcome where professors would start engaging their students and getting them on to doing a project and basically the way that Professor Halsey had done in Alaska. I think there would still be some push, but there's still going to be some pushback, and basically, especially on the official level, it'll be very hard to all of a sudden find funding and have the wherewithal to actually to conduct projects like this. So I think that there could be some, but there will be quite limited in that from that sense. So I think it's going to be up to the grassroots, really. It's not going to be an official. I don't think the official world all of a sudden is going to decide that this is great. Okay, let's jump on this bandwagon. I would hope it would happen, but realistically, I don't think it will. I think this is still going to have to be a grassroots effort, where this is going to travel through the engineering community, through various associations, and then the pressure is going to well up and build from below, as opposed to all of a sudden people in the leadership position who are entrenched in basically holding the positions and positions of power are all of a sudden going to have an aha moment and decide to really pursue an effort of consciousness in this regard. So that's my take on it.
Casey, same question. That scenario of a professor bringing attention to this study by just introducing it to the class and having their students give their 2 cents on it. How realistic is that scenario, and do you think that would be effective?
I do agree that it would be an easy avenue for them to bring it forward. I mean, it's what professors do. It's what what any teacher does. You show them the way, but you can't make anyone go there. So by having the ability to show it to people and offer it up as information for discussion, I mean, it's a fantastic opportunity. I will suggest that I don't know how many will do it, but, the beauty is that right now we do have a bit of momentum, and we have a number of engineers who have graduated from university and do work in the field that do plan on bringing it to their university. And so it doesn't take too many to start to bring it, because just like engineers who have never heard of it, there's professors that have never heard of it, meaning have not heard of Building 7, have not looked into it at all. They have their lives, and they just go on with their lives, and the shock and trauma was so great that they just put it aside. So there's going to be a ton that haven't even thought about it enough to consider it enough. But so there's an opportunity for engineers out there that do have a presence of mind to bring it to their own university professors and ask them to take a critical look at this and bring it to their classroom and utilize it. And then, of course, there'll be opportunities to have these same engineers that are willing to do that effort to go to their own universities and give talks on it. So there's a lot of opportunities for engineers out there to participate in the role of bringing this information forward, as Kamal says, in a grassroots effort.
As you guys are probably aware, there are engineers out there, again, who may silently agree with us, but they may be afraid of signing the petition, or they have been over the past couple of years. I've talked to some of them. I mean, some people maybe live outside the United States but have to come to the United States for work, and they don't want to interfere with their ability to travel into the United States. That's just one example. There's other concerns that they have, so they don't end up signing the petition. But now that this Building 7 study is out, I try to look at it as an opportunity to invite those engineers to come on and sign that petition. The study will stand by your decision to put your name on the dotted line, or on the computer screen line in this case. So I'm going to ask you guys, we'll begin with Kamal again. In your view, why should engineers who've been on the fence about this for so long, about signing the petition, consider doing so now in light of the Building 7 report?
There's no magic wand that we can really raise. I think people have to basically convince themselves that this is an important issue. And I think this is going to provide the tools, essentially, and the data, and all the... Everything's going to be staring you in the face, all this additional information. I think from a professional standpoint, I think engineers will have a curious mind, will want to basically take a look at this, whether they look at it privately or publicly, but they will take a look at it. And I think the more they take a look at it, the more the critical mass develops, where people around them are basically starting to talk about it, and the debate rages on, and discussions are lively, and basically people are evaluating, and people are thinking and considering and looking at the various different viewpoints. That is what's going to bring about change, and that's what's going to feed on itself, essentially, in allowing people to spend the time, and perhaps even people who have not signed the petition, maybe they would, once this becomes more of becomes a big issue in their consciousness, which I think it will. Then I think anybody who's conscientious enough in their profession is going to be very interested in demanding further investigation, and demanding further investigation as well means joining the AE community and signing the petition.
Casey, same question. Why should engineers who may have been on the fence consider signing now in the light of this World Trade Center 7 study?
Well, it's an opportunity to directly participate in something that, from our point of view, is moving the conversation forward directly. So it's oftentimes folks in this world that find things wrong don't know how to participate And by signing the petition, that raises the awareness of the authority, if you will, of the architects and engineers for 9/11 truth. But furthermore, by signing it, you also will engage in your mind deeper, and then you may decide to join in and bring this information to your local chapters of engineers or your university that you went to, or your company that you work in. And it gives you all that much more evidence and information and authenticity and authority to try to generate change that can happen in front of you, as opposed to other ways that people try to generate change.
Exactly, and it's such an exciting time to be a member of the 9/11 Science Truth Movement. People who have been out there for years talking about this are really getting excited over this Building 7 study and all the great things that are happening, and of course our audience needs to be a part of that too. We're going to be telling you about ways that you can get involved in the future to spread awareness of the study, spread awareness of the tons of other things that we've got going on around here to bring justice for the people that died on that terrible day and to bring truth to America. And I know these two gentlemen are at the forefront of that. I want to thank you for your service to AE 9/11 Truth. And guys, thank you so much for coming on 9/11 Freefall today. This program is on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also keep track of the archives by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele, saying have a great week and good luck.